Let's get things started. This is going to be a tier 100 Bastion of Faith with one of the hardest affixes, Death Pulse. This is probably one of my least favorite, as it requires constant dodging and repositioning, ultimately lowering the total DPS with the potential to create dangerous situations if mobs don't die fast enough. I'm Stoiven, welcome to the channel. I enjoy pushing the hardest endgame content in RPGs, and lately I've been playing a lot of the Sorc on Diablo 4. This build guide I have for you today is called Arc Lash Pure. It's a Melee Sorc build and focuses on the Arc Lash basic skill and creating some huge burst windows. Here we have an elite. We're going to line everything up and try to pop them for as much damage as possible. If only all packs could be that easy, but I don't think we'll be so lucky. We did have our ultimate unstable currents running for that whole duration, and that adds a significant amount of DPS. Here we're fighting a mob without it up, and we're going to see how this goes. Takes about one extra pop to finish him off, but since he was alone and not too dangerous, we didn't have much trouble. Now those two first easy mobs may have led us into a bit of a false sense of power or security, and we got real sloppy here. We had no business staying in as long as we did versus those damage reduction mobs, and we paid the ultimate price for it. But no matter, we'll get right back up and go in again, and at least we took care of those two damage reduction purple glowing mobs, and we're gonna go back and give this guy a proper go, this time with our ult up. So we pop everything on him, we burst him down, and 2 pops is all it takes. Now here we're showing another example of what not to do. You gotta remember that those big guys have that wave of lightning smash attack that's killed me more times than I can count. But surely that'll be my last silly death for a while. We're not gonna have any more of those, right? Oh no, just kidding. One more. That's how you use up 3 of your 4 lives in the span of about a minute. I believe what happened there is that we finished off the elite, but his red lightning balls were still in the air, and we came into contact with one. Now normally this wouldn't kill me, except I think since the elite was dead, we may have lost a lot of our damage reduction versus elites, versus close, versus burning. And without all those additional layers, you can see how fragile we are to damage. We need to be close to enemies, and we need to keep them burning in order to mitigate a lot of the damage they put out. Now that we've used up most of our lives in this dungeon, we're going to need to change our strategies up slightly. We're going to need a more defensive approach that involves us kiting back or running from fights when we feel like we're getting overwhelmed or they're too dangerous. And we're going to have to make sure to only fight on our terms with a more surgical approach. Here we see our Flame Shield enchant. That cheat death is coming off cooldown. That's going to be nice to have. It'll make us feel a bit more safe, but we gotta be careful not to get too relaxed. I want to talk now about some of the new gems that just came out in Season 1, starting with the Caged Heart of Tal Rasha. What this gem does is gives us a stacking damage boost for each different element we deal damage with. It's pretty easy to get 3 stacks of this as a sorcerer with Fire, Cold, and Lightning. Fire coming from the Firebolt enchant, or Flame Shield, Cold coming from Ice Blades, and Lightning coming from a variety of sources in our build. But you may notice that we have a 4th stack of this most of the time, and that is causing us to gain almost 50% damage as a multiplicative mod. That's about the equivalent of 2 legendary powers. This 4th stack is coming from the Caged Heart of the Barber, which is the second new gem I want to talk about. What this gem does is for 2 to 4 seconds after you crit, it suppresses and stores up all the damage that you would do, and then releases it multiplied by a damage mod to that mob that you're hitting and all enemies around it. I believe this is doing shadow damage, and that's why it's giving us a 4th stack for the Tal Rasha. The 3rd gem I use is going to be the Caged Heart of Tempting Fate. This one's going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to give us a large amount of critical strike damage, but it comes at a cost, and that cost is going to be a significant reduction in all of our non-critical strike damage. When you use this gem, I highly recommend you have at least 40% crit chance, but ideally you would want to have 50 to 60%. These numbers are achieved pretty easily now with the new upgrade to the Esu's Heirloom Unique Boots. These boots used to only give 25% max of your movement speed converted to crit chance, and now you can get up to 30% of your movement speed converted to crit chance. which means that with a good enough amulet and these boots, you could get over 15% crit chance from them all of the time. The last gem I want to talk about is going to be the Caged Heart of Revenge. This is a defensive new gem that is a great alternative to the crit damage one, especially if you do not have 40 to 50% crit chance, or if you find yourself with an extra blue socket and want to be a bit more tanky. What this is going to do is suppress up to 20% of all incoming damage that you take, store it up, and then whenever you use one of your defensive skills, it'll release it in a big AoE around you and damage enemies. This damage is not very significant, but it could be enough to one-shot some smaller mobs in lower keys. One thing to note with this gem is that it is not working favorably with barriers in my testing. It does not appear to suppress or reduce damage taken while you have a barrier up. But then when the barrier is gone and you would be losing life, it is fully working for that 20% damage reduction. Now that big clump of mobs went about as well as it could have. That was 4 or 5 elites all pulled in, and you got to see the huge barber explosion for about 16 or 17 million on all of them at the same time. Unfortunately, this resplendent guardian couldn't be pulled in to just enjoy death with his friends, so now we're going to have to slowly work on him while we panic and scramble and run away. This resplendent guardian is a very, very difficult mob. There I should have just committed to the kill and stayed in for an extra second or two, since our flame shield cheat death procced anyway, and now we're going to have to wait for our cooldowns to come up one final time to finish him. But it looks like he's running back to where he started, so we're going to have to wait a bit to try again. And we do not do a very good job of dodging that last fire wave he shoots out. So now we are out of lives. We're going to have to continue this dungeon and play extremely safe, because right now at least we do not even have cheat death or an extra life to fall back on. Here in this room, we seem to have gotten the attention of just about every single monster, so we're going to pull back to the safety of this doorway and use it as a little bit of a choke point, while we try to reset and kite and only fight when our cooldowns and immunity is up. This mob now is immune to CC, he's unstoppable, so we're going to have to wait that out a bit before we go and fight him again. And problem seems to be solved there now. We're going to head back up into this room up ahead again and grab what I believe is a channeling pylon. Yep, channeling shrine. That's going to hopefully get us to where our flame shield cheat death comes back off cooldown. It's going to give us a lot more mobility in CC and a flame shield active that has about 50% uptime. We're going to be cleaning up this pack with it, no problem, and continuing onward. One thing I wanted to talk about that also changed this season for sorceresses is this new Glyph of Destruction change. Previously, this used to only provide crit damage to core skills. Now it's giving us crit damage on all skills, and it has been a welcome addition to the build. I saw this change right away and knew it was going to be a significant amount of power. Now we're heading back towards that resplendent guardian that gave us some trouble before. Hopefully with our ultimate and all of our abilities we'll be able to one-phase him here in a set of cooldowns, and it looks like we will thanks to that little ad being next to him as well, helping with a big barber pop on him. Now we're just going to clean up this loot here and get ready for the final boss fight and boss encounter. It's going to be waves of monsters spawning and eventually elites mixed in, quite a few elites in fact, followed by the final boss and 2 of her sentinels. And this is a extremely dangerous event. I much would have preferred a standard boss fight to this. We have our cheat death flame shield there proccing very early, and we're now out of lives and out of cheat deaths, and we are going to be just fighting and tanking our way off out of this, showing the real tankiness of the build. Running low on potions, pick a couple up there, trying to just dance and kite in whenever our abilities are ready. Here the boss and her sentinels have just spawned. You need to be very careful now, as these guys could easily one-shot me if I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. Out of cooldowns. Need to try to hide and dodge and reset a bit here. And I actually considered going to town there for a second to wait out the cooldown on my cheat death, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to just fight and beat him now. Just waiting for everything to be up, and then we're going to jump back in here. Let the barber do its thing, and that's going to be the dungeon. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching, and please consider dropping a like and a subscribe or comment. It really, really does help the channel a lot. I know you've probably heard that a bunch of times, but it really does help. Let's now get started with a gear overview. We'll start with the two defensive pieces, helm and pants. First we have the helm. The stats you're going to want on this are going to be cooldown reduction and basic attack speed being the two most important. And then if possible, you're also going to want to get int and then all stats. I have willpower on my helm. I wish that was just all stats instead. And then for the legendary powers, you're going to want to use two defensive powers. The first one is going to be Disobedience, which is going to still give you that stacking armor each time you deal damage up to 60 stacks, which now caps at 30% instead of 50% like it used to be. This is still a good enough power, and it's going to provide a significant damage reduction. Moving on to the pants, we're going to want 2 to 3 damage reduction stats on pants, and then also int and all stats if possible. So if you have 3 damage reduction mods on your pants, then you can go with int or all stats, either would work. And then for the legendary power, you're going to want basic skills grant 20% damage reduction for 6 seconds. This is going to be up nearly 100% of the time. If I haven't fought anything in a while and I'm about to, you can just basic attack nothing and it'll proc this 20% damage reduction. You can hold down shift and use your basic attack skill if it's on left click, or hit the basic attack keybind near anything and it'll give you that 20% damage reduction. For chest, we're going to use the unique Raiment of the Infinite. This is just the best item for this slot. You could go with a more defensive chest, but then you're going to lose out on a ton of stunning enemies and pulling enemies, and I just wouldn't want to play the build in high-end content without it. The most important role on the chest is going to be the teleport, pulling and stunning enemies, the duration of that, the unique power. You're going to want to get that as close to 3 seconds as possible. All 5 gem sockets in helm, chest, and pants are all going to be rubies for 4% life. Your barriers scale off life, and life is going to provide you the most survivability. Now let's move on over to the boots. I know we've already talked about these a little bit in the video, but the boots that are preferred are going to be Esu's Heirloom, these newly buffed unique boots. I would say if you have a good enough roll on these, plus move speed on your amulet, it is a go ahead to equip them. I would aim for at least 23-24% move speed, and then 28% crit chance conversion to make these a usable pair. Low rolls, I would say, are definitely not worth it. If you do not have the setup ready to swap to these boots, you can use a pair of legendary boots with ranks of teleport, ranks of frost nova, movement speed, and then either int or all stats. And then the legendary power that I would prefer on boots would be for 4 seconds after unstoppable, and while unstoppable, you gain 25% move speed and can move freely through enemies. This will speed up your clear times dramatically and just provide a big move speed bonus to the build that's nearly always up. Now let's go ahead and talk about the 6 offensive powers. These can be in any order except Amulet, which I'll leave for last. On the gloves, we're going to have crit chance and attack speed. These are the 2 most important. You want both of these values maxed or as close to max as possible. You also want lightning crit damage, and you're going to want int or all stats. I've been saying all stats a lot instead of int, because all stats does really provide a lot of good bonuses. It helps It helps activate the attribute threshold bonuses on your Paragon tree, giving you a lot of extra damage there. And it provides crit chance and dodge and dex, and it still gives a little bit of int for just generic damage to your build, and then a tiny amount of armor from strength. All stats is a very valuable stat on gear. But enough on that. The power you're going to want first of these legendary powers is going to be Conceited. This is going to give you 25% increased damage while you have a barrier, up almost all the time. Whenever you use any cooldown, you gain a barrier for 3 seconds. That's just one of our passives. Next up, we'll move to the weapon. On the weapon, you're going to want vulnerable damage and basic skill damage. If you can't get both of those, you could try to get crit damage or lightning crit damage instead. And then again, you're going to want int in all stats. For the second offensive power, we're going to want the control power. Now, this power has been nerfed a lot. It used to double or triple dip if you had monsters both immobilized and stunned and frozen all at once. Now, you're only getting that one time, but it's still a good enough power. This is still our whole setup and build relies around CCing mobs, so getting the 35% damage on CC'd mobs is good enough. Next, we're going to move to the offhand, the focus. On this item, we really want these 4 stats. It's going to be cooldown reduction, basic skill attack speed, crit chance, and basic skill damage. We really want the crit chance to be as high as possible, just like the gloves. Cooldown reduction and attack speed, also extremely important. It's pretty hard to find a good one of these. I got extremely lucky with mine. But if you had to drop one stat, I would say you could forego the basic skill damage and just try to focus on the other 3 things. For our third offensive power, we're going to want the Storm Swell aspect. That's going to give you 20% increased damage to vulnerable enemies while you have a barrier. This aspect is much more conditional and less damage than the previous aspect on the gloves, the conceited one. But it still does provide enough of a benefit where it's included in the build. Now we'll cover the jewelry. I'm going to skip the seasonal gems because I've already covered them, and we'll talk about them at the end. For now, we'll just focus on the stats and powers on the jewelry. For rings, they're both going to be the same. For stats, we're going to want crit chance as high as possible. That's the most important. You really want 7.5 if you can, followed by crit damage and vulnerable damage. And then the fourth stat you can have be lightning crit damage or life, depending on what you're missing. If the item power is high enough, I would definitely recommend going for the life roll, as that scales very favorably with higher item power. If it's a lower item power, maybe go for the lightning crit damage roll, since that is the same regardless of item power as long as you're at that ancestral level. Our last 2 offensive powers that are not going to go on the amulet are going to be the Edge Master's power. That gives you a 20% X damage multiplier based on your primary resource when casting a skill. Since we don't spend any resource with this build, we should always be at full. That's just going to give us a 20% damage bonus. And then the other offensive power here is going to be Retribution. This is a lower damage version of Control, but it still provides a nice 20% damage boost against stunned enemies. And finally, our amulet. This is going to be our last piece we're covering. We're going to want cooldown reduction, devouring blaze ranks, movement speed, and defensive skills. I was, again, very lucky with this amulet, getting all 4 things that I need. The movement speed on mine could be a little bit higher, but other than that, it's perfect. And then for the power, we're going to want the rapid aspect, which is going to give basic skills 45% attack speed. This is normally only 30%, but since we're putting it on the amulet, it gets a nice boost up to 45% attack speed. Now we'll cover the remaining 5 gems on the gear. We'll start with the weapon and focus. Up until this point, I've been using topazes, but I'm very close to swapping over to emeralds. This is because before level 90, you don't really have enough Paragon points to get enough generic pool percent increased damage. But at these higher levels, definitely at level 100, you're going to want to swap over to the emerald, because the crit damage to vulnerable enemies then will provide more value than the 20% basic attack skill damage. Now the last 3 remaining gems, I'm going to cover the seasonal gems that go in the jewelry slots. That's going to be the Barber. The Barber is going to store up damage after you crit and then explode it in a big AoE for shadow damage. The shadow damage is important because the second one we're going to use is going to be Talrasha's. Talrasha is going to give us about 12% extra damage for each element we do, stacking. We do fire, cold, and lightning. That's normally just 3, so it would be 36%. But with the Barber, we're able to add a 4th element, up to 48% stacking damage with the Barber explosion. And then the last gem we're going to use is going to be the Tempting Fate Heart. That's going to give us just a bunch of crit damage all the time, but at a cost of our non-crits deal less damage. You're only going to want to use this gem if you have enough crit chance, and that is primarily achieved by using the Esu's Heirloom Boots. Now it's time to take a look over to the skill tree. We'll start off at the top with Firebolt, 1 point, just for the enchantment effect, to make mobs get burning. Then 5 points in Arc Lash. We're going to grab Enhanced Arc Lash to make it attack again if it crits, and then our first big decision point is going to come up here, whether we take Glinting Arc Lash or Flickering Arc Lash. Glinting Arc Lash is what I would usually run. It'll help reduce your cooldowns and smooth out the build whenever you hit a stunned enemy with Arc Lash. But Flickering Arc Lash has a lot of value too, especially if you're running the Esu's Heirloom Boots as part of the build. The 18% move speed will end up giving you over 5% crit chance if you have a good enough pairs of Esus, so that's nothing to be forgotten. We're going to skip all the core skills and all the passives there completely and move right over to the defensive wheel. We're going to take 2 points in Flame Shield, the Flame Shield movement speed, and the Flame Shield heal. Then we're maxing Teleport, all 5 points, and taking Enhanced Teleport to lower its cooldown, and then 30% damage reduction after Teleport. This is something that is up almost all the time when you're actively in combat. You should never try to fight without this 30% damage reduction after teleporting being active. The last skill we're going to take in the defensive wheel is Frost Nova. We're going to max it with all 5 points. And then we're going to take Enhanced Frost Nova and Mystical Frost Nova to make it apply vulnerable and reduce its cooldowns. We're also grabbing some points in the passives here. We're taking all 3 points in Glass Cannon, just a nice more damage multiplier. And then we're taking 1 point in Elemental Attunement. You could end up putting more points in this. I'll cover later where we can get some flexible points, but 1 point is usually all you need to keep this proccing at a fairly reliable rate, and it does have a cooldown. Next, we'll move over to the Conjuration Tree. We just do 1 point in Ice Blades, just to be able to get Enhanced Ice Blades and Summon Ice Blades, to help Ice Blades reduce the cooldowns of our other skills. Then we're taking all 3 points in Conjuration Mastery, whenever we have Ice Blades up, and whenever we're in our ultimate conjuring Lightning Spears. This is just giving us massive damage boosts. And then we're moving over to Protection through Align the Elements. Just 1 point in Align the Elements is enough. That'll be at 40% a lot of the time. And then all 3 points in Protection, giving us as big a barrier as possible whenever we use any skill with a cooldown. This effectively turns all of our skills into mini ice barriers, or ice armors, and that's why we do not even need to take the ice armor skill anymore. Now we're going to move over to the Mastery Tree. We're skipping all the skills here, but we are taking max points in Devouring Plays. This has become kind of a staple with any Sorc build that can crit, getting extra crit damage versus burning enemies. You can run that Firebolt enchant to apply burning to all enemies, and it's just a very nice addition to any Sorc build. Now we're moving down to the Ultimate Tree. We take a lot of passives here, along with Unstable Currents and Prime Unstable Currents. This is going to be the button that makes you feel the strongest. When this is up, you're going to be doing a ton of extra damage and gain 25% attack speed with everything. Now for the passives at the top, we're going to grab Hoarfrost, 3 points. This is just going to give us another legendary power, effectively, 18% increased damage to frozen enemies. And then here's where one of the newer innovations with the build took place. We take the 1 point in Cursing Currents to allow us to get down to Conduction and to Electrocution 3 of 3. Electrocution 3 of 3 we've pretty much always had, but Conduction is the new addition. This is allowing crit strikes to give us 9% move speed for 3 seconds, which normally wouldn't be enough on its own, But since it's giving us extra crit chance with Esu's Heirloom Boots, now it's giving us move speed and crit when we crit, and it became too good to pass up. For the key passive, Veer's Mastery all the way. It just is going to make you so much stronger than taking overflowing energy and going the crackling energy route. You're going to have 25% damage reduction versus close enemies, and you're going to be dealing 12.5% increased damage with all of your shock skills against close enemies. We're a melee build, we're always close when we're fighting. This is just a great node to take. That's just about going to cover all the skills in the build. I did mention that there were a few little flexible swaps you could do. It's mostly going to involve dropping the 3 points in conduction and then moving back up to the middle of the tree. We're going to throw a couple points into either elemental attunement or into flame shield to just make flame shield duration go up a bit higher, or maybe we want to max out align the elements to keep up our elite damage. Or you could do a mix by putting a couple points into elemental attunement and then maybe throw a point over into precision magic just to increase that lucky hit chance, proccing that even more if you just really want to maximize your odds of going for the reset. I don't think any of that's super necessary though, and I think you could just leave the 3 points into conduction. And now it's time for the main event, the Paragon board. I've unspec'd all my points and we're going to fill this in as I explain it, so that you can have clear pathing and reference points the whole way up, like a level 60 reference, 70, 80, 90, and then eventually at 100. We'll try to show the full board. So right at the start, we're going to take all the nodes pathing towards this first glyph socket, and in this first glyph socket, we're going to put Flame Feeder. That's just going to give us some more damage to burning enemies and more direct damage to burning enemies. We're grabbing all the dex nodes around it and working our way up towards the first board gate. The first board we're going to socket in the board gate is going to be the Burning Instinct board. Now we're not going to head towards the glyph socket right away here. Instead, we're going to path up and over to the right and grab these attack speed nodes. These attack speed nodes are going to be pretty close here to another board gate to the right that we're going to head towards. And then we're going to put in the Elemental Summoner board. Not so that we can get another glyph socket unlocked yet, but so that we can get even more attack speed nodes. Attack speed is going to make this build feel great to play, and we want to get as much of that as early as possible. So now once we path up here to get these attack speed nodes, this should be a pretty good board layout for around a level 60 board with most of your renown zones done. You have both sets of attack speed nodes, you have a glyph socket, and we're pretty close to another glyph socket, which we're going to go get next. So now that we have that, we're going to work our way over towards the left of the Burning Instinct board. We're going to fill in this glyph socket and all the relevant points around it. And we're going to put in the Destruction glyph. That's going to give us a ton of crit damage. Once we have that, we're going to continue up and over to the left. And our next board is going to be the Frigid Fate board. Here we're going to want to grab the good vulnerable nodes and the glyph socket. And in this glyph socket, we're going to put Exploit for now. So once we have this Exploit and the vulnerable nodes around it, and we're getting all of the relevant dex nodes for the bonus, this could be a pretty good look at like a level 75 Paragon tree. It would be the 3 glyph sockets, the vulnerable nodes, the attack speed nodes, and we're well on our way to a good looking Paragon tree here. Some nodes I've missed in the middle here. We can go back to the Burning Instinct board and take some good burning elite damage nodes in the middle. It's time for those. And then we're going to work our way over to the right-hand side of the Elemental Summoner board and pick up that glyph socket. We're going to take all the nodes along the way while filling in the dex thresholds that we want. And in the Elemental Summoner glyph socket, that's where we're going to put the Control glyph. That's going to give us a lot more damage versus crowd control enemies and just be another huge multiplier. From there, we're going to be heading up on the Burning Instinct board all the way to the top board attachment gate. On our way up, we're going to make sure to grab Safeguard. This is just going to give big damage reduction versus elites and some armor that we desperately need. And then we're going to finish heading all the way up to that gate and attack the Static Surge board. Now in the Static Surge board, for now, We're going to head right up towards the glyph socket and try to finish off that bonus there. We're going to swap the exploit glyph over to that socket and put the tactician glyph in the frigid fate board. At this point, we hopefully have the glyphs leveled up enough where the tactician bonus will be increasing that vulnerable damage. So we make a small swap there. And then once we have our glyph set up, we're going to finish exploring this static surge board. We're going to head over to the left and down and take paralyzing, the rare node, giving stun damage. And then we're going to head up to the top of the board and grab overwhelming for even more stun damage. Just got to swap around a couple points to make it all the way up there. We had some extra elite and vuln damage that we're going to need to path. And this is about what your board should look like at level 90. Where we go from here is going to be just to the level 100 board. I'll show you what that will look like since I don't have enough points to fill it out completely. We're going to remove the 6 points we put in the left of this board, since we need those to help us get to the new board. We're going to connect all the way to the gate on the right-hand side, and then we're going to head down to the glyph socket. This is going to be the enchantment master board. We're going to grab all the points around the glyph socket, and we're going to put in the territorial glyph. This is going to give us more damage to close enemies and provide a damage reduction bonus if the conditions for dexterity are met. And then from here, we're only going to be able to get a couple of rare nodes, but we're going to head up in the middle and grab the 2 good non-physical damage nodes and elite damage nodes that we can grab, and that's going to pretty much cap us out on all 225 Paragon points at level 100. That's going to pretty much do it for this build guide. If you've managed to watch the whole thing to this point, I commend you. I plan to keep the D4 planner link updated with any fine-tuning or changes over time. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to see more Sorc content. Thanks for watching.